Welcome to Lindsay's Fallout! Here we cover game spoilers, TV show spoilers, and how Fallout connects to the real world. The chances of me offending you by accident are high, so I just want to give you a chance to escape. If you want a break from real world issues, I don't blame you at all, but you are going to want to pass on this one. So come prepared to give me the benefit of the doubt. Feel free to pause the screen for more details. Privilege. This is one of my least favorite words. I hate it so much the word is blocked on my TikTok account. Not because I'm running away from my own privilege, but because no one is going to be able to tell me something worthwhile about it within TikTok's character limit. So let's talk about it here, where we all have some room to stop and think. With the concept of the vaults and how they preserve the broken promises of the old world, the Fallout franchise has created a beautiful metaphor for the pros and cons of privilege. They show us how it impacts someone's point of view, and how it impacts how they are viewed by other people. In this video, we're going to unpack how Lucy and Cooper Howard the Ghoul were affected by the stark contrast between their sheltered origins and the brutal realities of the Wasteland. The narrative not only critiques the ignorance that comes with privilege, but also challenges us to reconsider the impact of privilege on one's ability to adapt to or even grasp the complexities of a post-apocalyptic society. Or our society. So let's start with Cooper. Cooper Howard, before the apocalypse, was clearly very privileged. These people are so insulated from the conflicts of the world that they can enjoy an ideal, carefree life even as the world teeters on the brink of destruction. Somehow, Cooper is getting judgment from other guys at the party for stooping so low, having to resort to entertaining children, despite being a hotshit movie star. These jerks make remarks about him being a pinko and taking their money. Let me know if you want to hear a whole rant about these guys like this, because I don't want to go off on too long of a tangent. For now, the point is, if Cooper doing this job in this paradise is their rock bottom, that's privilege through and through. If the world is so volatile that bombs are about to drop any minute and you're at a kid's birthday party at the top of this picturesque hill and you have the option of turning off the unpleasant news instead of confronting the truth.
Sounds like a nice way to live.
Immediately before the very short but very great war, we see Cooper telling his daughter that in the Marines he was taught if they ever drop a really big bomb, hold up your thumb just like this, and if the cloud is smaller than your thumb, well, you run for the hills. Accents are not my thing, sorry if I made him sound like a hick. This is actually an urban legend Fallout fans have heard for years about the origin of the Vault Boy symbol, and it's not true. And apparently it's not true on the show either. Turns out it was just a tasteless decision made by a well-meaning but privileged movie star trying to support his wife. Cooper's wife worked for Vault-Tec, so she arranged to have him appear in a commercial shoot in which he spontaneously and rather awkwardly made the decision to stand in a thumbs-up pose. He wasn't thrilled about being there, he even made a remark about how he never does commercials. But in the context of his personal life, shooting this commercial was a good dude thing to do. Look at that good dude. To those who couldn't afford vaults, this gesture could seem incredibly insulting, and I suspect we're going to learn more about the public backlash to this in the next season. From the perspective of Cooper's privileged bubble, the priority was about being a good husband. He felt just as weird about it as the average citizen might expect a decent human being to feel, but he was sucking it up to be a team player. And that's how they get us, my friends. Privileged people are ripe to be exploited by corporations and governments, as long as they have families. We naturally focus on making decisions that benefit our loved ones. If the decisions we make for our loved ones are bad for the world as a whole, that's the world's problem. We got mouths to feed up in here.
For you and Sean, no price is too high.
Good answer.
I have my moments.
This is why ads telling people to buy war bonds are always telling you to do it for your children. I'm single and gay, so I'm impervious to this kind of manipulation. That's why conservatives are trained to hate gay people. In another flashback, we see Cooper portraying a sheriff shooting a criminal in the head. Cooper questions this scene, arguing that it's out of character. The director tells him, "They already know you're a good man. They want to see that even a good man like you can be driven too far sometimes." People who do bad things find comfort when media tells them they can still be good people despite their actions. Ask the creator of BoJack Horseman how he felt when he found out Harvey Weinstein liked the show. Maybe Cooper did have doubts putting that thumb up or shooting that criminal, but he is put in a context where doing those things felt like the good and nice thing to do. Those of us who worship at the altar of New Vegas know that morality is always gray and contextual. And we gotta get wise to how much power culture and media have in influencing our understanding of what defines a good or bad person. These bastards use it against us every chance they get. These hegemonic forces can convince us that even a good guy can be violent. and whether or not someone has enough privilege to say no to engaging in that violence. For example, look at the testicular fortitude on this man as he says with his full chest, with his feet planted firmly on the ground, and his nose firmly pointed in the air, that West Tech's marvel of battlefield innovation was not up to his standards. Now, if you're not the kind of person who understands how bizarre this looks to some of us, then you might also be the kind of person that doesn't get the joke when someone says, carry yourself with the confidence of a mediocre white man. 'Cause, people without privilege can't talk to people like that like this. If you can afford the risk of being a Karen to war profiteers, then,
Sounds like a nice way to live.
when we say we should carry ourselves with the confidence of a mediocre white man, that's not necessarily us making fun of mediocre white men. We should all have that kind of confidence. No matter how mediocre we are, we should all love and respect ourselves and each other, and we should hold people with authority accountable. I'm just trying to point out that that's not the world we live in right now. And if you treat other people like there are no real, valid reasons for them to believe it's unsafe for them to be this bold, you're gonna come off like an ignorant jackass. This isn't the world the rest of us live in. No, not even in America. In this world, if you really want to walk around with the confidence of a mediocre white man, then you'd better actually be a mediocre white man. A straight cis neurotypical one at that. For the rest of us, confidence alone will not cut it. When his wife suggests they could get into one of the good vaults, we can see his illusions drain from his face. He was pretty oblivious to the reality that even among the vaults there was a hierarchy, and his privilege shielded him from understanding that the less fortunate are getting handed a crappier deal. What system was he protecting? What was he giving that thumbs up to? And now we move on to Lucy. In Philly, Wilzig summarizes Lucy's upbringing based on his mysterious knowledge of her origins from Vault 33, that Vault 33's primary crop is corn, where a telesonic projector displayed looping images of the Nebraskan countryside, possibly to maintain a semblance of connection to the outside world, or more to the point, the old outside world. And he notes that Lucy was raised in a meritocracy, where the cultural and social values emphasize doing the right thing. Yeah, this upbringing in a controlled, value-driven environment was always going to contrast starkly with the harsh realities of the wasteland outside. So let's unpack all the ways her seemingly perfect upbringing totally let her down. Inside the vault, Lucy tries to start a family book club with her father Hank and her brother Norm. The book they feature is War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, a classic that intertwines the lives of families against the backdrop of the Napoleonic Wars. Its themes explore, well, war and peace, both literally and in the personal lives of its characters. It offers a sweeping narrative of historical events, deep character development, and profound insights into society and human existence. It's considered one of the greatest novels ever written. It still comes off as obnoxious if you think you understand War and Peace because you read War and Peace. This highlights the artificial, controlled, safe, distant, privileged nature in which Lucy learned about these concepts. She believes she understands things that she couldn't possibly grasp without lived experience. This is how a lot of people feel about the Ivy League progressive crowd. People who believe they know so much, but appear to know so little about what it's like to live with certain kinds of struggles. Some of you are already thinking about this scene. I promise we'll get to it in a different video, but for now I can definitely say the Vault Dwellers are not as served by their isolation and ignorance as Vault Tech would have them believe. When the mysterious overseer from Vault 32 proves to be the character Moldaver, Hank says, "I think I know who you are," and she replies, "Everyone knows who I am." Which was brilliant television writing because we, the audience, have no idea who Moldaver is. And now we suddenly feel weird about that. Like, why don't we know this thing everybody knows? Why doesn't Hank, our hero daddy, know? This is our first clue that the people in the wastes are not the ones cut off from civilization. The people underground are. And speaking of good television writing, which I suppose I could say that every single transition in this video, but when Hank gives himself up to Moldaver to save Lucy, he says to her, "You are my world." This perfectly expresses the inflated ego she was conditioned to have and how it's not entirely her fault. No one should be anyone's world. The world should be our world. By instilling this idea and framing it as loving, supportive, and wholesome, her condition to egocentrism is reinforced. And we get to see it bite her in the ass many times moving forward. Let's jump to when Lucy sets up her camp in the desert and meets Wilzig, the Enclave defector, for the first time. His dialogue here is like worthy to be tattooed on my body, and I am not sure if I'm joking. He says, "Listen, You need to go home, miss. Vault dwellers are an endangered species here. You come from a world of rules, of laws. This place is indifferent to all of that. I do not think you would be willing to do what it takes to survive up here. If you insist on staying, then you will have to adapt. The question is, will you still want the same things when you have become a different animal altogether? Chills, my dudes. Chills. This season is Lucy's journey to becoming a different animal. And it's an awkward, bumpy, cringy road. In the Wasteland, Lucy encounters a man in the desert in a shack struggling with basic necessities, specifically clean water. She offers him a sip from her water bottle. Just a sip. But he unabashedly guzzles down all she has. Here we point out how silly a privileged perspective looks in survival situations. In the privileged environment of the vault, Lucy had the luxury to assume another opportunity to drink water would always come along, so she sees sharing water as basic human decency. But this man has never been sure of when he might next find water, so he's gotta seize every chance he gets, which he pretty much directly says.
I need that.
Yeah, me too.
Somebody hands you water, you drink it. Even if you're not thirsty, you drink it. Survival instincts, for reasons that should be obvious, force individuals to prioritize their immediate needs over social etiquette. We can't expect others to show us grace in basic human interactions if deep inequalities leave them with no grace to spare. But it's when Lucy meets Ma June that things get truly embarrassing. She awkwardly begins a conversation by noting Ma June's possession of Vault-Tec merch, subtly accusing her of illicit trading, and speaks disapprovingly of the shop's potential affiliation with criminals. Lucy's attempt to adhere to Vault-Tec's mission to have earnest concern about intellectual property rights, petty moral qualms that hold no weight in this brutal environment, is just as condescending as it is bonkers. Lucy is decent. If she grasped what these people were up against, she would know better than to run her mouth about intellectual property. So by running her mouth, she is putting on display what she doesn't grasp. Ma June is surprised to see a real-life vault dweller and mocks the naivete and sheltered life of vault inhabitants. It's all kind of funny until Lucy tells her she's looking for Moldaver, asking if she knows who that is, and Ma June says, "You guessed it. Everyone knows who Moldaver is," and she sternly warns Lucy about the harsh realities of the Wasteland. She points out Lucy's naive appearance, marked by her clean hair, nice teeth, and having all 10 fingers, some cute foreshadowing for what's to come. Lucy, trying to maintain her idealism, argues that the mission of the vaults is somehow universally, empirically important. But the mission of the vaults should be important to everyone.
The idea is, that we're going to save America.
Ma June asks when exactly Lucy plans on saving America, and says with glorious delivery, the vaults were nothing more than a hole in the ground for rich folks to hide in while the rest of the world burned. Folks in Philly more than likely share the cynical view that the vaults were merely sanctuaries for the privileged and powerful to escape their comeuppance for, let's say, mismanaging civilization. Lucy makes an effort to acknowledge her privileged background here, but the damage is done. Ma June cuts her off with a harsh reality check. You know what folks up here say about the vaults? Fuck the vaults. I was so excited at this point watching the show, I took pictures of the screen and sent them to my friends. It's funny, a project I've been procrastinating forever is to do an analysis of the Barbie movie, arguing that it's not about feminism, it's about privilege. But thanks to the show, I feel like I don't have to. Lucy, Barbie, Vaults, Barbie Land. This conversation between Lucy and Ma June. This conversation between Barbie and the high school girls. Thematically identical. Done and done. This blunt dismissal serves as a stark awakening for Lucy to the resentment held by those who survived outside the safety of the vaults, challenging her vault-centered worldview and prompting her to reconsider the broader impacts of the vaults on the larger post-apocalyptic society. And hopefully, how obnoxious it sounds to wag her finger at Vault Boy bootlegs, while she still has that finger. Let's jump ahead in time for a little bit. The Ghoul gets distracted by a fight with Maximus. How did the Ghoul not hit Maximus? It's called an idiot savant perk. And then there's this really well-crafted, fun, exciting scene that launches Lucy into the next level of the plot on the search for her dad. I loved everything about this! I wish quest setups in the game were this convincing. Bethesda, they actually gave this person a legitimate reason why she has to trust a stranger. Pay attention. It turns out Ma June needs to get Wilzig to Moldaver, Lucy's exact desired destination. This gives Lucy something to bargain with. Everybody has a motivation. It's such good writing. Lucy's brain hasn't caught up to that yet, though. She's freaking out. She says to Wilzig, well, what does Moldaver want with you? I mean, she steals dads. Moldaver steals dads. This is a great joke. Not just because it's funny, but also because it's consistent with the themes. Moldaver proves to be one of the most important political figures in the Wasteland. Moldaver is the NCR. Moldaver is Shady Sands. We've now heard twice that everyone knows who this is. But in Lucy's world, she's just someone who steals dads. I mean, I kind of get it. To me, Trump is just some guy that pisses everyone off. Let's jump ahead to a point a couple of episodes later that serves as another beautiful example of how Lucy's privilege has made her egocentric, despite her best efforts to the contrary. Maximus is walking with Lucy, and she talks about how the bombs fell 200 years ago. He says, the bombs fell when I was a kid. She laughs dismissively and says, is that what they tell you in your brotherhood? Now, after watching the whole show, we know he wasn't mistaken. They were just talking about different bombs. The bombs that are most relevant to Maximus's experience indeed fell when he was a kid. He was right there, in the middle of it. He is speaking to his direct lived experience, not something that the Brotherhood told him. He was just talking about something that she knows nothing about. And assuming she knew more about it than him is cringy enough on its own, but what makes it even worse, she was directly asking him to tell her about what she didn't know about the world. That was the context of this conversation. In her mind, she was in a place of humility, a place of being open to hearing new information, a place of acknowledgement of her own ignorance. And yet, instead of assuming there was more about the world she didn't know about, she still made this embarrassing assumption without a moment's hesitation. To Lucy's mind, there was only one incident of the bombs, and it most certainly did not happen when Maximus was a kid. And that core assumption that she is better educated than the savages on the surface rears its ugly head. This is so crucial to see. So many of us don't acknowledge our privilege ignorance specifically because we think we already have. But who could blame her? After all, her dad taught her that she was the whole world. It was so deeply instilled in her that she was humanity's last and only hope that she is actually a little disturbed when she finds out that Shady Sands ever existed with that population. I wonder if Lucy's reaction here surprised a lot of people. I can tell you that for me it made absolute perfect sense growing up in the American educational system. Y'all, when I was a kid in the 90s in school, I thought that the rest of the world still had kings and slaves. We were told that Americans were free and that's what made America great, and we should all be perfectly happy with whatever hand we're dealt here because anywhere else would be absolutely awful. So this is a step toward realizing that she doesn't have the right to feel superior because she represents a way of life that is truly superior. It's more like she doesn't deserve that feeling of superiority, and flaunting it makes her look, well, how it makes her look. So let's talk about how it makes her look to the Ghoul and how it affects their relationship. They cross paths when he comes to Philly looking for Wilzig, and his first impression of her is as cringy as one would expect, but in an adorable sort of way. Lucy is standing there with absolute confidence, telling the Ghoul he needs to leave Wilzig alone. She admits she doesn't know the full situation, another example of not seeing your own ignorance because you think you already see your own ignorance, but she insists the Ghoul's actions seem unfair. She even warns him that if he attacks her while she's trying to calm things down, she'll have to assume he's the main aggressor, and that everyone in town would back her up if she fought back. Aww. Ma June's reaction, fucking vault dwellers. Jeez. Perfectly sums up the audacity of her expecting to finish that speech without getting shot. Lucy then shoots the Ghoul with a syringe or pistol, I believe a new weapon for this show? But a perfect choice, it's a quiet and minimally impactful weapon. So the Ghoul just responds with, well, that is a very small drop in a very, very large bucket of drugs. And yes, he says drugs instead of chems, and it's weird, but it's probably because chems never come up the rest of the show. Anyway, moving on. This kicks off our awareness that Lucy's scale of toxicity differs from the Ghoul's. What is significant to her is gonna be minimal to him. There was another great example with Ma June and Barv. Ma June says, "Sorry for yelling, I was just shot in the leg," and then Barv goes, "You would have yelled at me anyway." The point is, Ma June talks about getting shot in the leg like it's not that unusual an occurrence. It's just kind of something you learn to deal with. And I think it's a good opportunity for all of us to just stop and think about how we tend to judge how bad an event is by the chances of it occurring. Like, it doesn't matter how absolutely horrific something is. If it happens to us every day, we're kind of expected to just be able to deal with it. Sometimes we get really good at adapting to things that we should never have had to adapt to. Maybe we're indifferent to some terrible things, not because they're not terrible, but because we're just used to it. And it's interesting to contrast this moment of Lucy and the flashback of Cooper on that film set. Both have had the experience of having the privilege to see violence as excessive and unnecessary. He's just had some experiences since that Lucy has not. And whatever those experiences were, they led him to thinking it was a reasonable idea to, tie her up and use her as bait to catch the gulper to get Wilsig's head out of its stomach. The show points out, in a very entertaining fashion, that the intention was not to torture Lucy. Her discomfort was just a necessary means to an end. The Wasteland isn't actually cruel, at least not in the sense that it's sadistic. It's just a place where it's unsafe to be trusting and kind. Which brings us to the Golden Rule, the principle Lucy cites when explaining why the ghoul shouldn't treat her the way that he is. The Golden Rule is a moral principle that advises treating others as one would like to be treated. Confucius said it. Jesus said it. The idea has always had a decent publicist. I know as a privileged American, it has certainly been drilled into my head. And so far, Lucy, that adorable little scamp, has indeed treated others how she would want to be treated. She engages diplomatically before resorting to violence because she would want to be spoken to before being shot in the face. She offers only what she would reasonably expect from others, so she expects others to only take a reasonable amount from her. But out here, any moment spent in speech could be interrupted by a bullet. A small sip of water offered can quickly turn into a whole bottle taken. She fails to grasp that those she interacts with don't have the luxury to make themselves that vulnerable. The concept of the Golden Rule doesn't hold up when survival is on the line, resources are scarce, and the playing field is uneven. And now, she desperately needs Wilsig's head to confront Moldaver. And if the roles were reversed, if she was there when the ghoul or anyone else really needed something, she would stick around and help until they found it. But the roles aren't reversed. And instead of helping her, the ghoul ties her up and makes his own plans for her. And she expects him to assist her, like a princess. She cries out, "What about the head? I need the head to get my dad back!" Which in context is embarrassing and silly. Expecting the ghoul, or anyone really, to prioritize her needs simply because of how hard she needs them in a world that sucks this much for everyone is insane. Spend some time on the internet, you'll see this insanity everywhere. So the ghoul absolutely nails it with, "Yeah, well, the Wasteland's got its own rule. Thou shalt get sidetracked by bullshit every goddamn time." It's not just a genius nod to what playing Fallout is like, but ties the whole concept together in a nice little bow. "We don't have time for your privileged expectations up here, Vaulty." The ghoul and Lucy go on a long walk together. She's thirsty. She's miserable. She's missing a shoe. Oh, she's missing a shoe. The ghoul drinks from a canteen in front of her and doesn't share, despite her begging. This is a good time for us all to remember what happened to her when she tried being generous with water. He even goes as far as to dump some of the water. Why? Fuck you, that's why. When they come across another water source, it's irradiated and gross. If she wants water, that's her option. The ghoul says, water, water everywhere, and not a drop to drink. Ain't much stays clean up here, Vaulty. And, at this point, creeps like me are trying to ignore that there's something weirdly sexy about all of this. But don't worry, I assure you I am not a shipper for these two. The show absolutely should not turn up the heat on this relationship. But if the Rule 34 crowd isn't hard at work, I am very disappointed. He ties her up and makes her beg. She asks him if radiation is what happened to him, suggesting both his appearance and his overall, vibe. And he says something like that. His answer carries an underlying message that becoming what he is today required more than just physical changes. It involved profound trauma that has disconnected him from his humanity. At least, insofar as what we have seen. Then he shoots a perfect square shot right on Vault Boy's face because he's been leveling up for 200 years, no max cap. We're all gonna look like this when Fallout 5 comes out. Let's talk about when Lucy meets Raj, the ghoul who is going feral. In the lore, ghouls are explained as humans who have undergone severe radiation exposure leading to a process they call ghoulification. Ghouls can retain their human consciousness, but some eventually lose their sanity, becoming feral ghouls who are aggressive and mindless. The game's version of zombies. They are a common threat in the Wasteland, and I find they are best dealt with a Ripper or a Mr. Handy Buzzblade, but if you have enough flamer fuel, that can be a nice time as well. I digress. I'm being a little insensitive to Raj here. Anyway, the ghoul puts Raj out of his misery, and Lucy is shocked. She protests even more fervently when she sees that the ghoul is stripping Raj's flesh for cannibalistic consumption. I mean, if you level up for 200 years and you never get the cannibal perk, you're doing it wrong, am I right? At this point, Lucy has gotten enough feedback from this world to know that these people aren't sold that the rules of her world apply to this world. But she is still sticking to her non-fatal guns. Her privileged point of view hasn't yet faced that there are some situations that aren't fixable, so she protests the cannibalism and digs in her vaulty heels by saying, "You know, my vault has endured hardship too. In the Great Plague of 77, everyone had to quarantine. They couldn't work the farms together. People starved, my mother included. My dad dropped to 128 pounds, and he still refused to do anything like this." 128 pounds was my goal weight when I was in high school. Totally irrelevant. It's just, kind of a specific number. Anyway, the ghoul laughs and says, "Well, there's what people say they did, and what they really did. I bet your daddy was first in line at the cookout. I bet he had a bib with a drawing of his neighbor's ass on it." And since we watched the show, we know exactly what level of savagery Daddy Hank is capable of. Lucy kinda does, but kinda doesn't. So far, we've seen a lot of evidence that Lucy expects there to be goodness in people, and all we have to do is find a way to reach that goodness, and then all this savage behavior will no longer be necessary. But her perception of what humanity is like was artificially constructed by savages, outside of her awareness. To protect her idealistic perception of what Vault-Tec and humanity truly is, Vault-Tec engaged in savagery beyond imagination. A golden rule society might be an admirable goal, but if it requires oppressive control to achieve, humanity isn't there yet. But unfortunately, at this point, Lucy hasn't had to figure out a reason to live without that illusion, so she asks the ghoul, "How can you live like this? Why keep going?" The question infuriates the ghoul too much to even respond. His silence could be due to the unshared reasons he's sitting there contemplating, or perhaps it's Lucy's privilege showing through, her assumption that he even has a choice in the matter. So he responds to her, "Well, one good question deserves another. Why the fuck am I doing all the work?" And he hands her a blade and says, "Now come on, Vaulty. Ass jerky don't make itself." Y'all aren't gonna believe this, but that was supposed to be all this video was about. Just the ass jerky metaphor. But then it occurred to me that I can't explain the ass jerky metaphor without first talking about privilege, and then privilege just became the whole video. But how can I sum this up for now? Ass jerky is a hilarious term to refer to invisible labor. Basically, there are a lot of different areas in life where we can have more or less privilege, and if you indulge that privilege without respect to other people involved who don't have the same privilege, you end up passing all the work that you're not doing to them. We've talked a lot about how Lucy thinks she's saying no to engaging in certain things because her moral principles are above it. But in reality, the world doesn't live up to her principles, so she just passes the dirty work that she's unwilling to do to the people who don't have the luxury of having those moral principles. Just like Wilzig warned her, the rules are different here. She will have to be willing to do things that don't fit neatly into her golden rule framework to survive, and Wilzig warned her that she wouldn't have it in her to do so. So this is the moment she's gonna decide. Is she gonna allow herself to become a different animal right now? And did y'all notice that Lucy does not say okie dokie here? And now that we're just getting too far off track, that's definitely gotta be another video if we're doing that. Let's get focused on privilege. Lucy and the ghoul continue their journey, and Ella Purnell does a great impression of how I felt as an ADHD autistic kid coming home from school every day. Lucy sees more gross irradiated water, but shocking reveal, that's what the ghoul has been filling his canteen canteen with. Makes sense, being that he is a bucket of drugs. If he had offered her his canteen before, she wouldn't have known that. She wouldn't have consented to the quality of water she was drinking. He wants her to see the truth. He wants her to, figuratively speaking, see how the burger is made, and to give her a chance to make her own choice. So defeated, she drops to her knees and drinks the gross water. Luckily, we know she's gonna come across some Radaway later because ew. He says, now you're getting it? How does that golden rule jibe with what's going through your head right now? From the Ghoul's perspective, Lucy's illusions about what she expects from other people can only survive for so long. Once she's kidnapped enough, denied water enough, and had her water gulped down enough, she'll learn that idealistic speeches aren't gonna get her needs met in the real world. So as screwed up as this looks, it's coming from a weirdly loving place. She says, "What are you?" He says, "Oh, I'm you, sweetie. You just give it a little time. We're all gonna look like this when Fallout 5 comes out." By suggesting she will become like him, it's clear he doesn't actively want her harmed. He anticipates she will have a future. He really does believe he's doing her a favor. He's not being sadistic. Like we already saw, he wasn't trying to torture her, he was trying to catch the gulper. He thinks her golden rule is going to get her killed. He doesn't see a way for her to survive in this world without adopting some degree of his cynicism. The Ghoul begins to cough, implying that his need for his Ghoul serum is becoming more pressing because that's why people cough on TV, and Lucy seizes this opportunity to escape. In the scuffle, Lucy bites off one of his fingers. Little killer. In retaliation, the Ghoul cuts off one of Lucy's fingers and says, "Now that right there is the closest thing we've had to an honest exchange so far." I talked about this scene extensively in my video about why the Ghoul is perfect, and I somewhat regret not saving it for this one, because in that video, I don't believe I connect this event to Lucy's golden rule as directly as I should have. Earlier, I brought up how Lucy shoots him with the syringer and it has no effect, and I brought up how that was foreshadowing the difference in Lucy and the Ghoul's capacity for enduring hardships. When Lucy bites off the Ghoul's finger, he barely notices it, but when he cuts off hers, it feels so much more brutal and excruciating. In my previous video, I pointed out how the exchange only looks uneven if you disregard how much suffering the Ghoul has had to experience throughout his life for that act of brutality to be barely a blip on his radar. But then I didn't discuss how the golden rule applies to both positive and negative actions. It's straightforward to advocate for treating others with kindness, as we wish to be treated ourselves. But what about when it comes to violence? If Lucy insists that people should treat others as they themselves wish to be treated, then she must also be prepared to face the consequences of her actions. This is what makes this an honest exchange. It might seem strange that I'm suggesting I think the Ghoul is in Lucy's corner, especially considering he cuts off her finger and sells her to organ harvesters, but the Ghoul's dialogue at the Super Duper Mart totally has my back on this one. When Lucy asks what awaits her inside, the Ghoul cryptically responds, "You're about to find out." And when she expresses shock at being sold, he remarks, "You got problems out here too, sweetheart. Best you try your luck behind that door." I don't know where to begin. It's perfect. Perfect line, perfect thing for him to say right there. I'm shocked I didn't write it. First of all, this scenario is very Fallout. In the games, your character might find themselves in a similar bind, whether sold, detained, or relentlessly pursued. These storylines often explore themes where, despite seemingly unsurmountable odds imposed by more powerful forces, there's always a path to escape for a crafty wastelander who knows when to choose defiance over compliance. The Ghoul and the organ harvesters may have plans for Lucy, but she can and does make other plans. This is a vital life lesson of Fallout that I think serves us all out here in the real world. There are no rules, only constraints, choices, and consequences. The risks inside aren't inherently worse than those outside, just different. Inside, Lucy faces captors who feel entitled to own her. But outside, there are rad scorpions. We haven't seen them yet, but they're out there. As far as the Ghoul is concerned, the only difference is which option will net him his vials, and he made a very Fallout choice. As far as he's concerned, whether or not he is sending her to her doom is totally on her. And we watched the show, we know how this pans out for both of them. Right after Lucy went into the Super Duper Mart, the Ghoul passed out and she had quite the adventure inside. First, she fights off Snip Snip, a Mr. Handy who wants to steal her organs, then threatens the harvesters with harming Snip Snip, which they get a good laugh at. Aw, she cares so much and she keeps expecting other people to care. But there's a twist this time. She shows off her science skill by putting a Braxo draining fluid in Snip Snip's syringes. She seizes her moment and boldly demands freedom not only for herself, but for all the captive ghouls. Aww. Her ideals of universal justice and mercy take center stage again, and once again, it doesn't go that well. The harvesters reluctantly agree, but as the ghouls are released, The complexity of Lucy's decision becomes apparent when the harvesters get their faces eaten off. Some ghouls, lost to their feral nature, cannot be saved or reintegrated. Not all victims of the Wasteland that still have a pulse can recover from the damage that was done to them. This makes Lucy look at the painful limits of her influence, and gives some disturbing validity to the ghoul's experience of the world and the way he interacts with it. How ghoul is too ghoul? Martha? Raj? Perhaps too ghoul. But is the ghoul too ghoul? Is he too ghoul for school? I don't know what depresses me more, the fact that I just said something that stupid, or how I know damn well I'm not the first person on the internet to say it. The point is, Lucy shot Martha. Lucy became a good man who was pushed too far. She got there. There did come a point where she could no longer hide from the reality that she can't Leslie Knope her way through the Wasteland forever. And you gotta love when Snip Snip is like, "Can I help you have a better day?" And she says, "No, thank you." That is a commentary on something, but not the themes of this video, so me and my ADHD are gonna have to push that aside. I promise I'm medicated. Anyway, Lucy has now officially seen some shit. So she is armored up and luckily found a replacement shoe that fits. Plausible. And she found an abundance of ghoul serum. By now, she has put together that whatever this serum is, the reason he needs it is to prevent becoming whatever the hell Martha turned into. So after securing the vials, Lucy could have easily used them as leverage or simply withheld them to ensure her safety or get whatever she wants from him. But instead, she leans into him and says, "I may end up looking like you, but I'll never be like you." And this magnificent bitch just drops all the vials right next to his face and says, "Golden rule, motherfucker." And I just, once again, no words, flawless, and subverted my expectations. I mean, didn't you expect her to come out of that experience finally ready to stop being so idealistic? I had no doubt. I thought she was about to turn the tables and put that ghoul on a leash. But no, she did exactly what most of us don't have the guts to do, but really, really need to do. Stop going to war, because war never changes. Despite the ghoul's previous harsh treatment towards her, Lucy knows giving him harsh treatment right back accomplishes nothing in the pursuit of a better world. It exemplifies her deep-seated compassion and adherence to her moral convictions. Daddy Hank was right. The big bad world is not gonna get to her. She doubles down on her belief in the golden rule. It is stupid and brave, and I love it. So far, she hasn't seen proof that she's wrong. She's only seen proof that she'll die without help. She's not wrong, and that's what I want to end on. We should not underestimate Lucy, and we should take the Lucys of the world a little more seriously. People often say seeing is believing, but when the world we need doesn't exist yet, we're never gonna see it if we don't believe in it first. So we need to support believers like Lucy, as embarrassing as she is. Lucy is filled to the brim with privilege ignorance, the disease of the civilized. But that disease is easily treated with knowledge and wisdom. And she put herself out there on the surface seeking that treatment despite looking like a jackass doing it. It took bravery and principles for her to do that. And yet no matter how bone-chillingly terrifying it is for the privileged to peek outside their bubble, we never celebrate them for it. We will crucify them for not doing it, but if they do, we just treat it like it's our bare minimum expectation. Growing up with the comfort and the brainwashing of vault life and making the choice to step out of it is a decision that is so dramatic, so terrifying, so earth-shattering, most vault dweller types in the real world never will. It is not easy. And expecting people to do something that difficult without respecting how difficult it is just a different kind of ignorance. I know I've poked a lot of fun at Lucy's naivete throughout this video, but I still say it's better to seem foolish than to give up on humanity. So here's my plea to the vault dwellers out there, the Lucys, the believers. The Wastelanders are angry because they need you to recognize that your peaceful existence isn't due to your enlightened principles, it's because you were ordained by savages. Seriously, me, Lindsay, I'm sitting here right now on my own private $10,000 media production rig, almost entirely ignorant to what's going on in Gaza, because I was ordained by savages. My family worked at the Y-12 facility in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, enriching uranium for the first atomic bombs. They didn't know what they were working on until the newspapers and radio broadcasts announced the damage that had been done.
Where did you know about the bomb? Sure, I knew all about it. I lied. I didn't know the first thing about it. We had no idea what they were doing here in Oak Ridge.
This so-called land of the free manipulated my family into killing hundreds of thousands of people, not with rifles, but with badges, punch cards, and privilege ignorance. These were humble families who needed to feed their kids just like everybody else. And our benevolent overlords provided them housing, free single-family units, and told them they deserved it more than other people. How could they say no? The American government gave people an offer they couldn't refuse, and now we all have blood on our hands. That's called entrapment. But the people responsible didn't get prison time, they got parades. Because history is written by the winners. While we're supposed to applaud ourselves for ending the war, I just feel imprisoned by a terrifying regime that continues to exploit American egos, American poverty, and American ignorance to this day. Y'all, I don't care how big a problem is. I don't care if we're up against the end of the human race. If the best solution we can come up with is slaughtering hundreds of thousands of innocent people, we are not done brainstorming yet. If you're the killer, you're a bad guy. If you gotta kill, kill. If you gotta look the other way, look the other way. But admit what you're doing. This denial of ignorance and brutality has to stop. If this is the best we can do to defend ourselves, we are indefensible. Luckily, I don't think it's the best we can do. Again, Lucy's not wrong. Actually, the classic intro of Fallout is. The problem was never the destructive nature of man. The idea that man is inherently destructive is a tool of authority to make us trust it more than we trust each other. The problem is the destructive nature of fear. Wastelanders don't cooperate because they are afraid of each other. And to put it in pragmatic terms, living with that much constant fear does physical damage to the body. You know how people spend their lives searching for happiness, we're entitled to the pursuit of happiness, and then most of us come into adulthood believing happiness doesn't actually exist? Well, it does. It's called a regulated nervous system. It's real, it's measurable, it exists, and it was given to us by forces more powerful than civilization. Civilization just steals it from us and then makes us work for them to get it back. Lucy's purity doesn't make her superior, but it does make her useful. Even if the conditions that allowed Lucy this luxury were monstrous, that luxury protected her nervous system. In the Wasteland, that is a superpower. In a lot of ways, she is physically more equipped to think clearly in the face of challenges than the average Wastelander. She's going to see ways out where a more traumatized person will typically see no way out. And the world really does need that. The Ghoul really does need that. He needs her hope just as much as she needs his wisdom. And I think we can all agree that that's the beat the season ends on. Lucy shows us enduring hope, that benevolence can prevail even in a world riddled with murder and dirt. She is a resilient, badass, love warrior with the strength of character to maintain her principles under extreme circumstances. So let's celebrate and support the Lucys. The world desperately needs transformation, and only those who believe in change possess the power to make it happen. Yes, hardening ourselves to the trauma has kept us alive, but it also threatens to annihilate our collective spirit. Lucy's act of handing all the vials to the Ghoul was not just brave, but a radical act of love. She will fight this world before she will fight other people, even at the risk of her own ass. The real tragedy isn't Lucy's expectation for decency, it's our disbelief in such decency. If we believed in Lucy as much as Lucy believes in us, we could make real change. Because war never changes, but love changes everything.
If you have to go out, take a gun and a lamp, 'cause everybody knows there's a devil in camp. Ow!